Mr. Mutahung, Mr. Mako, heads of department, colleagues, morning. My name is Lana Labiskachny. I represent and I work for a company called Marsh Limited. I'm a licensed financial services provider. Now, in the old days, we were called brokers. So, like Mr. Mako has pointed out, the purpose of my discussion and talk today will be to inform you, and we will interact about risk and insurance on WIL integrated learners and students specifically. So starting off the presentation, we'll be looking at work integrated learners in terms of a definition. So a work integrated learner in terms of an insurance policy is defined by the university, and the insurance contract will follow the definition that is put forward by the university. Having gone to sources such as dictionaries and Google, a WIL integrated learner is based on a principle that learning should be demonstrated to be appropriate for a qualification and assessed. I think those are the crucial words, assessed wherever the place of learning is taking place or is provided. We engage students with theoretical learning at the institution, at the university, but to enhance that educational learning, we bring to the fore the work integrated learning by taking them to a workplace to enhance their profession, their careers. And then lastly, we've just highlighted a number of examples of work integrated learners in terms of a definition: interns, clinical placements, education, apprentices, etc. Very important when we talk work integrated learners, legislation comes to the fore, governance. When we talk insurance and we talk work integrated learners, the first thing that comes to mind is the contract. Because we, as the university, as Tshwane University of Technology, basically take a student that's in our care, custody and control, and we put them and we place them into a third-party environment, and there has to be some sort of governance, some sort of contract to actually govern this relationship, to say, whilst my student is at your place of learning to enhance himself, the following will be your responsibility. The following will be my responsibility. In the absence of contract, and as you can see the second bullet point, then common law prevails. And unfortunately, fact of reality is, in the absence of contract, becomes very grey. So the first point that we are aware that TUT has a contract, a standard contract of agreement, which we will study and provide input going forward after the workshop today. Legal relationship from an insurance point of view talks about insurable interest. Let's use an example like in our own personal lives. We all have homes, we all have vehicles, we all have assets that we want to insure. So whomever stands to lose a financial loss is an insurable interest. There has to be insurable interest in terms of insurance to insure. So the insurable interest between us, the university, and our students, the work integrated learners, becomes that contract and that agreement that we have between us and the student, that we will place you to enhance you and to further your career. A responsibility on us as Tshwane University of Technology is to manage the risk associated with the work integrated learning. We're taking an environment that a student is accustomed to, and we're putting that student into an environment that he's not familiar with. So our responsibility would be to reduce the risk associated with those WIL integrated students by applying risk management. So there has to be a responsibility on us to actually do an assessment of that area, that domain that we are placing our students in. We have to do orientation, make them aware, similar to when you started in your job. You go through orientation. You're made aware of the company, the rules, similar to how we have house rules. That same principle should apply prior to placing that student into that third-party environment. Student orientation is great. Accurate record keeping, we have to know at all times, and we have to, if a parent, if a third party, if an audit is done, we have to be able to say, this student is visiting this premises. We have to account for where our students are at all times, and supervision is core. The crucial role for us, as well as the third-party principal or the employer that we place that person into, is supervision. He cannot act alone. He's a student. He's a work-integrated learner. We're taking the theory, we're taking the practice, but you can't allow that person to operate outside of certain parameters, and we'll look at those a bit later in the report. So we've identified certain risks that are insurable, and just in general risks that's associated with work-integrated learning. The first that comes to mind is risk of the person. Liability risk, so liability takes two folds, and we'll discuss the liability later in the report. The mobility risk, so when he's in transit, when he's in a motor vehicle or as a passenger. The professional risk, and that is what I was alluding to earlier, when he, apart from what the theory, goes into an environment where he actually has to apply himself under supervision. And then last but not least is the health and safety environment and the legislation associated with that. So currently TUT has insurance cover in place for risk of the person. So a couple of years back, TUT came to Marsh as the financial services provider, and we spoke about the risk, and we came up with a solution in the form of personal accident insurance cover. What I've demonstrated in this slide is the identity or the category, and that is what I was saying earlier, is defined by the universities, defined by heads of department, because it is your policy. You know what you want underwritten by this policy class. So currently the policy reads 6,000 work-integrated learners, and I'm not going to quote verbatim word for word, but please, as heads of department, make sure that within your environment and the way the policy is structured currently, that the two dovetails. If we need to talk, if we need to add, if we need to amend, this is what this session is about. Talk to us, talk to Rudy and the team, and we can amend it. So as you can see, away from the premises, at the third-party premises, there's a portion of mobility risk included in an uninterrupted journey, very important for this category of insurance. There's an accidental death benefit to each and every work-integrated student of 5,000 Rand. The core word in this definition is accidental. So if a work-integrated learner, a student, suffers from serious illness, heart condition, something as an illness, the policy will not respond. If the person passes away as a result of an accident, the policy will trigger. There's a portion of disability built in, and then medical expenses. The first portion or the first priority always is, this is not a medical aid. This is a contingency policy to assist students that does not have a medical aid. So if I'm a student and I have a medical aid, that will be the first port of call where I will go and I will constitute a claim. So this is what insurance of the person TUT currently has in place for the work-integrated learners. Over and above the personal accident, there's a policy for HIV for a number of students, because not necessarily all our work-integrated learners do have that exposure. So we've identified as TUT, we want a number of students in a specific environment to be covered for HIV. Again, if you look at the operative clause, the proximate clause of the cover, it comes back to accidental bodily exposure. It can be in the form of a needle prick, exposure to blood, bodily fluid, etc. The benefit is captured there. Very important that I wish to highlight to heads and the forum, and I know the university does share it with you each and every year when we go through a renewal. There is a claims protocol that students must follow. The policy will only trigger if this protocol is followed. If the student is accidentally exposed and he goes on his own, and in 3 or 4 days he comes back and he says to you there was an incident and we didn't follow the procedure, the policy will not respond. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is that each and every student within this environment that is exposed to the HIV risk must understand, must know. I've highlighted what must be done on the bottom of page 6, and if we turn to page 7, just to reiterate again, the call center number, how it works, the antiretroviral medication, the follow-ups, etc. So important to understand and make sure that students are aware of this process for the HIV benefit. On page 8, apart from the risk of the person, there's always liability risk. So as TUT, we buy general liability insurance. Liability covers ideally, and I've quoted our wording, our policy, and again when we contract with third parties to place students, it would be ideally to nominate, have a look at their policies, because it's easy to buy a policy at a nominal cost just to have insurance in place and not necessarily having the adequate cover in place for our third party that's on their premises. Because the minute our work integrated learner steps onto site, he becomes a third party person. So our policy as TUT currently covers injury, which includes death, injury, disease, etc., damage and loss. And ideally we would want to govern that relationship and make sure that that third party has adequate cover in place and has similar wording relating to ours. Because as you know, we as TUT is part and parcel of a greater and a bulk buy called Teresa, and we as Marsh ensure that whatever wording, whatever cover is in place is fairly wide. So we would want to advocate that message across to whomever we contract with, if and where possible. The mobility risk on the next page covers when we're in transit, either when we use a TUT fleet vehicle. So the TUT fleet vehicle does not dictate, does not exclude the use of TUT vehicles by students. Important though to understand, there has to be delegated authority. So you as an HOD, if they sign off, the student is using the vehicle for the business of TUT, the policy will respond. So in terms of mobility, if we authorize the use to go to a third-party premises as a WIL integrated learning, our policy will respond in the event of damage. The second bullet point talks to your liability risk. So the student unfortunately is involved in an accident, he drives into me as a third party, I become the third party liability whilst using a vehicle, and over and above that if there is a passenger in the vehicle. So TUT's policy is fairly wide, and again, just in closing, wanting to reiterate, we don't exclude students as long as there's permission and he or she has authority to use the vehicle. We're all familiar with the Road Accident Fund. It's a compulsory form of insurance that legislatively, as a road user, whether we're a pedestrian, whether we're a passenger, we are obliged to quote from Road Accident Fund. So when you're in a vehicle accident, over and above that you want to claim from a third party. If there's death, injury, trauma, we go to the Road Accident Fund. It is similar to SASRIA, your riot and strike. It's a government entity, so you need to, in your person, TUT within their structure, has to go separately and on their own to road accident fund to actually claim. We've nominated on the last bullet point the website, and we can always give advice when and if required, but we cannot, as financial services providers, claim on your behalf. Okay. On the next slide, talking to professional risk, because many students, when we teach theory, will eventually stand in a profession, whether it's a profession, medical, architecture, engineering, and associated with that profession and that theoretical knowledge that we pass on to them becomes an exposure called professional indemnity or an error and omission. So professional indemnity for TUT, as a person that's in a profession, for me, for instance, I'm already qualified. So I have the associateship or the membership of a body that governs this policy and allows the policy to trigger. A work integrated learner under mentorship will not be claiming or allowed to claim from a policy as he's not a qualified person as yet. Hence the importance when you do post that work integrated learner into a third-party environment to make sure that whatever that work integrated learner will study, will learn, is outlined in the contract. I'm going to use an example. So I go in, I'm a nurse and I go into a hospital for practical training. So if I'm, as a nurse, is allowed to medicate, it has to be very clear up to what level or how it will be done. Will it be done with a person overseeing my actions? Very important, because if the contract doesn't stipulate and there is an error and omission and there is a PI policy, professional indemnity claim against TUT, we must be able to prove to the insurer that contractually, because that work integrated learner is not under our supervision, under our care, custody and control anymore. He's under the third party control. So it's up to the third party to make sure whatever he learns, whatever he studies, is signed off. So as an engineer, as an architect, I can do a drawing on a certain program that I use as a practical training that I'm going to get, but my mentor, before it's sent to the client, has to sign off on what I've done. I've spoken about the parameters. In the absence of contract, I've spoken about common law prevails, and I've spoken about insurable interest, which we all understand. So just workplace health and safety. It's important when we send our students, our learners out, that we send them into a safe and healthy environment. We advocate that as TUT, prior to sending students out, you do thorough risk assessments. You adequately prepare the student for what is waiting for him. I mean, just pass him on and say, you're going Monday morning, you're going to go to Marsh and you're going to be a work integrated learner. Where's Marsh's office? What do they do? How do I get there? What's my roles? What's my responsibilities? Things like that. So prepare them, have them ready when they actually arrive at the premises. And the host organization must have an induction program for the work integration, similar to how you would treat an employee. I mean, for the time he's at that premises, he's nothing else like an employee. So he has to be treated as such and have an induction on his arrival. And again, in closing, health and safety questions should be addressed by the university for review. And if you're uncomfortable to actually send a student to a certain premises, then don't. Because if you don't comply with health and safety, remember that insurance cannot cover anything that's outside of law. Health and safety is law. If you're in breach of health and safety and you want to claim against your insurance policy is not going to respond. So don't expose the student unnecessarily to a health and safety environment that doesn't conform with legislation. Just wanting to share with you claim incidents. So in general, TUT is part of TERISA, the Tertiary Risk Insurance of South Africa. As you know, you're part of 24 universities where Marsh is the financial services provider, the risk provider too. And we as TUT has had one incident of a work integrated learner or a student accidentally being hurt whilst at a third party premises over the last probably 7 years. Just wanting to talk to you again briefly on markets. Work integrated learning, finding personal accident insurance, finding liability insurance, and the like that we've spoken about is not difficult because again we within the Theresa fold we have the benefit of the bulk buy. And then I had a look this morning before I left the office, the price that you pay for, and I'm talking personal accident, the insurance of the person, because you would want to, in the event of an unforeseen passing, being able to go to the family and say, we're so sorry, but here is something. The premium attaching to that benefit is very small. It's not that we want to take over and insure everybody, but if consideration wants to be given to increase the 5,000, we can always provide a quote should the need arise. I think under general, I've spoken a lot. It was a lot to absorb, but are there any questions from the forum?
Thanks very much for the presentation. I just want to present a case to you. We've got a project together with BMW in Roslyn. We'll be placing a number of our undergraduates for a WIL program, developing automatic guided vehicles directly on the production line. Now they're under supervision of professional engineers and the plant engineer at BMW. Is there any risk associated with TUT if, let's say, one of these AGVs should cause bodily damage to whoever?
The determining factor is going to be the contract. So if our contract with BMW says that we will hold you harmless and you will hold me harmless, then it basically means that we in for all and they in for all. If the contract says that whilst my student is there and you are responsible for X, Y, and Z, it's very clear. So ideally, I would like to see that contract and then based on the evidence at hand, actually write a finding for you to say the following is possibly for your consideration and the following are risks that you know we've picked up that you can maybe consider and address. Because I mean the work integrated learning is so diverse. You get some students going into mines, you get some students going as nursing, as engineers, as you know with BMW. So, and every contract, it can't be in my mind a standard. The base is there, but there has to be add-ons to make sure that we are protected. And because, like I said, that student is in the care, custody, and control of a third party, and we need to protect him. So if we can have a look at that, we can comment on that contract specifically.
Well, there is no contract. We're just negotiating the
Okay, so let's say in the absence of a contract. So I'm a student and I'm at BMW. So oh, they have employment contracts. Okay, then it's separate. Remember, these are students that don't have an employment contract, they don't have a staff number, they don't qualify for COID, they have no benefits. The minute you have a staff number or you get a salary, the scenario changes. Because then it becomes COID. Yeah, we're talking here, no pay, I just go there for learning. Yeah.
If you say no pay, remember we pay our students a stipend from the CETAs, whatever. So
No.
they do receive a 2.5.
No, the grant doesn't qualify as pay. It's a grant. It's a yeah.
So then they are still insured.
Yes.
And if they lose a finger or what, they get paid 5,000 rand or 50,000 rand up to.
Yeah. Your accidental death is the 5,000, and
and injury.
there's a percentage depending on the bodily part that you lose. We're talking gruesome things, but that's a reality. So it's a percentage of the death benefit. So let's say, for instance, you use a pinky and you need your hands to actually do your job. The policy will decide, okay, it's 90% of the benefit. Or if you lose a little toe, okay, we don't use that, so that's 10% of the benefit. But the policy does talk to what disability benefit is payable.
Okay, can I just get back to the contract part? Because we sign MOUs with companies, and then the students, a lot of the time the CETA pay the funding into our accounts and we pay the students. And the students sign a contract with us. But I don't think, as far as I can remember, any of these contracts stipulates specifics onto loss, injury. Don't you maybe have a copy of something that you would prefer? Because if, and I know you say one claim in 7 years, but if by chance we have to claim something that we are covered, that we are ensure that our paperwork is in place.
Okay, the personal accident, the insurance of the body, as well as your mobility insurance, your vehicle, doesn't require a contract to be in place. It's only when you are on that premises as a third party and whilst you do the work. Okay, so the standard contract that TUT has, maybe we can have a look at that as a base and take it from there, if it's okay with you. And then we can tweak it, how it works for your department, but again, I'm sure legal will have to sign off on it before we just change it. But it's a work in progress, so, okay.
I think we had a hand from Governor.
I think the one issue was addressed here, but if the company received the CETA money and I have got a contract with the student, what then? Because then I sign a contract with the student and I receive the money from the CETA and pay the student. Who is reliable there?
I think where we are concerned, if I may say so, we don't care where the money comes from. Our focus from an insurance point of view is the student. And like I said to the lady, so on the personal accidents, the accidental death, that policy doesn't talk to contract, doesn't talk to whether you get a salary, whether you are a work integrated learner. So the 5,000 Rand, there's no money concerned, the insurer won't say, who paid what. Same applies to the motor. It is only important where it comes to liability, because liability becomes dirty. It's you said, I said, you did this, I did this, you didn't, it's like a divorce. And ultimately when you go to court, costs today are very expensive, and it can take up to 2 to 3 years for TUT to actually go into a legal battle, and that is what we are trying to avoid. We're advocating rather have something in place up front, so the money doesn't really come into it, Prof. No. Okay.
But then it basically entails that when the student is signing a contract with a company where he or she is working, that there is a contract between them, and then the responsibility shifts towards the company.
But is he acting on our behalf, the student? Is he has delegated authority for TUT, am I understanding this, to sign a contract on our behalf? Or is he signing a contract in his person? Why?
The student is signing a contract that I am working with you.
Okay.
So it's in their personal capacity that
Okay.
they are signing a contract. So therefore that responsibility reverts to the employer.
Who actually advocates the work integrated learner? The learnership, TUT. So we have students, and we say to the students, we have BMW that will take you on as a work integrated learner. So my question is, when he signs the contract, does he sign it almost on delegated authority on our behalf? Or is he on his own?
Registered students, sorry, these students register with TUT
Okay.
before they go into the world of work, so that they cannot be on their own.
Okay. So if he signs a contract on his own that has nothing to do with us and it can't be tracked to us, then we're out of it. So
We're actually placing the student, renegotiating with BMW.
then it's back onto us, irrespective of whether he signs it. It's the same as let's use an example of a minor child. Minor child is not allowed to sign a contract. But if you as a parent gives them a delegated authority and you arrange with the teacher to say, my son can go on this whatever, and he signs, I know I'm trying to demonstrate it comes back to us.
Let's restore some order. Somebody had a before.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because most of our students, we don't have contracts with the placement partners, but the students will go and sign the contract. However, we're still responsible for the students being placed there. You find that most of our students are paid. That is between them and the partners, right? But then what if in their contract, because you mentioned that if you get paid, then you're not covered by this. What if the company that is, even if they have a contract, doesn't cover for such things?
Okay. Okay, let's backtrack. I think we need to break this down into pockets. So the first pocket is the insurance of the person, the accidental death. Accidental death doesn't call on contracts. It will give the benefit in the event of death accidentally to the student or to the parents or to the estate. So that's the 5,000 benefit. Now I, as a third party, go onto a premises. I'm a third party here on TUT. If I get injured and I break my ankle, I'm going to sue TUT. So that's the second pocket. The third pocket was in your profession. And that is where we're trying to have clear guidelines as to when an error and omission at BMW occurs. And it comes back to the student, comes back to TUT, who has the deepest pockets. Who are they going to try and recover whatever loss they've suffered from? They're going to bring that relationship back to TUT, guaranteed. So that's why I'm trying to advocate to say, before we get to that position where we have to backtrack and go to court and you're liable and I'm not and this and that, have a contract in place up front. And I mean, if you are the coordinator, you instigated basically this relationship. And coming back to the principle of liability, I'm going to sue the guy with the deepest pockets, and that's TUT, because the student is a man of straw.
Okay. Gentleman at the back.
I think there are different scenarios. If the student is paid by CETA, some of the companies add up. They say, for example, the CETA grant is 3,700. When they pay the student 5,000, then they are actually paid by that company. Then there should be a contract between the student and the company. So I think then the reliability shift to the company. But the problem is if the student received the CETA grant, the CETA grant comes from CETA, we have got nothing to do with it. We don't see that money. So they still sign a contract. And we as WIL coordinators are not there at the premise to control the students and supervise them. So there must be a contract between the student and the company, because whose reliability, they can't come back to us and say, we didn't supervise the student. There must be a mentor who is responsible for the supervisor.
Yes. Yeah.
And therefore there should be a contract between them, because I don't know what is going on the premise on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So, but I think there are grey areas in this whole story.
Yes, for sure.
Make sure some students are not paid, then the situation is totally different. Then I think all these things are in place then to cover for what is necessary. But still, what about the reliability on the assets and things which you have mentioned? If the student is not paid, and if he broke something, or destroyed something, or whatever.
Okay, so the student, going back to the liability, is the third party on the premises. So if he injures himself or he breaks something, the liability policy will come into play. That's why I was saying it's so important that we look at our liability policy as TUT to make sure that it's wide. And we should really advocate that same principle to that company to make sure that their liability policy provides adequate cover. But if you say that you are removed from this relationship, it makes it really difficult. All I'm asking then, that trail, when it's a TUT student, whether he's earning or not, it's going to come back to us when there's a lawsuit. It will probably be reading the student in his name and or TUT. And we just need to be clear on that relationship, so when it does go to court, that we have something in place to protect ourselves, and there's something in writing to say, you took this student on, the contract was between you and the student, although we are the learning institution or the institution where he studies, we were not part and parcel to this. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, can we take the last
Thank you.
set of questions?
Sure.
I think it's Mr. Van Rooyen and Ms. Nisalet and second and the lady. It will be four now. There's a lot of appetite in terms of your questions. Mr. Van Rooyen.
I just want to ask, would it be okay if we ask the companies or partners to include a section of the contract they have with the student in saying whether a policy, that will they take responsibility or liability for the student? Because we have a working document that they need to send to say what the student going to do. So can we ask them to put that into the contract so that the contract legislate, like I say, they don't black and white. So this is what we will take care of.
That would be first prize.
Yeah.
First prize, guaranteed. Yeah.
Ms. Kisalete?
We recently lost a student in the department, a WIL student, like 2 months ago, and due to accidental death. So now, how long will it take before, or what is the period that the committee has to make sure, like, since it's been, the student has been there. So in this case, can they still make a claim, or how long do they have to take before they can make a claim?
Okay, so the policy is very clear on notification of claim. I want to ask a question. So are you aware of the university's claims principles and procedures as to you as an employee has a certain time to actually lodge your claim? So priority would be irrespective of whether it's a work integrated learner or whether it's an asset of TUT or whether it's a motor vehicle of TUT. There's clear rules that you have to abide to. So in this instance, I would suggest you get in touch with Mr. Rudy Stander, who, as the treasurer, insurance is part of his portfolio, and you notify him of the incidents. The policies of TUT, most of them, says you have a period of 30 days to notify loss or damage. All we ask is a one-liner to Rudy and his department to say, Rudy, we've had this incident, we are investigating, we will provide evidence. Please don't investigate, wait 6 months and then lodge the claim. The policy will not trigger. So you have 30 days. We will motivate the reason for the late notification, but irrespective of whether it's an asset, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's liability, whether it's death, please notify the relevant department, even if it's just a one-liner. It's very important.
Last but one.
Yeah, another question. Just I want to remind colleagues that for a student to be a work integrated learner is registered with us. And that student is associated to a department. So there's no way we can, Number two, for a student to go to a company, we are involved in taking the student to that company. Even if the company could recruit, it is the responsibility of us to make sure that that company does what the outcome of our work. So I just want to remind us that we are part and parcel of. So,
Thank you, Mr. Matan.
The last one.
Just a quick question. This
Sorry,
insurance.
can you press there's a microphone for recording purposes? No, just on the side. Okay.
I'll try to be. Okay. Your insurance doesn't cover students who are involved in work integrated learning within safety and security industry, policing, traffic, correctional services.
So the policy, any policy has exclusions. When we as Marsh gather information once a year from TUT on their risk, on their exposure, we ask questions. So when you reply to Rudy and his division to say, work integrated learners will be involved in the following risky activities, we disclose it to insurers, it's fine. If we don't disclose it to insurers and there's an exclusion relating to that, it can be excluded in terms of the policy. Hence the importance on work integrated learners specifically. The insurer must understand that work integrated learners can go into mines, can get training in the areas that you've just mentioned. So I would please ask that we are certain that all of those activities that they might venture into as work integrated learners have been disclosed to insurers.